Welcome to Living Outside the Matrix, the show where we dare to ask the questions that you won't hear asked in the mainstream media. Hi there, I'm your host, Nigel Howitt, and on the show today, it's a great pleasure to welcome back Rob Kirby from Kirby Analytics in Toronto in Canada. Rob, thank you for taking the time to join us today, and a warm welcome to the show.
My pleasure to be with you again, Nigel.
Rob, it's been about a year since last we spoke, and that was already in the grips of this, crazy lockdown pandemonium and alleged pandemic situation. And there are a huge number of economic implications, aren't there, around this whole situation? And we've been in it for some time now. I'm curious to sort of pick your brain today about where you see things going in light of this great reset, in light of of everything that's happened over the last year in terms of the sort of controlled economy situation we've seen, really. So anyway, enough of a sort of an intro from me. What are things looking like at your end over there in Toronto? And maybe we can just sort of bat the ball backwards and forwards and unpick it.
Well, Nigel, respectfully, I don't think we're living outside the matrix anymore. I think we are living in the matrix. The control, or let's say our controllers, have basically morphed from being, let's say, economic tyrants and control freaks to homicidal, genocidal lunatics. Just this morning, as I'm sure you're aware, the FDA in America has authorized and given their seal of approval to the Pfizer kill shot. And I don't even want to call it a clot shot. It's a kill shot. And the economic implications of what is to come could probably be maybe somewhat summarized by the reaction of truckers in Australia who are claiming they're going to shut down the entire continent of Australia come 31st of August, which is in 8 or 9 days now.
Yep.
So I expect similar actions to be taken here. It's only a matter of time, not a question of if. And we have a real brouhaha coming to a theater near all of us very soon. And I'm not maybe quite as aware of how the public is receiving or rejecting this action in the United Kingdom, and maybe you could share with us a little bit about that.
Yeah, well, first let me pick. I will indeed come to that, but first let me ask you about these truckers. I mean, is it a concern that they're all going to choose to act to do something, or is the concern more to do with post-experimental medical treatment sort of? People are going to be dropping like flies, and there aren't going to be, the workforce is going to be impacted. I mean, I'm assuming that you're saying this is going to be some sort of action taken, yeah?
Well, the action that is being proposed is that Australia is going to be literally shut down. So, I mean, what that would imply to me, no deliveries will be made to supermarkets. Traffic will literally grind to a halt because, if my understanding is correct, big rigs and trucks will literally be parked on expressways and motorways, and traffic will not move. So, extreme times call for extreme measures. The measures or the blowback that's been announced to date, in my view, is still extremely mild given the genocidal, homicidal tendencies of what we refer to as leadership. And I don't refer to them as leadership anymore. these people are out of their minds. I mean, basically what they've done to us financially, they now want to do to us physically. So that's where we are. It's dark times, Nigel.
It certainly is, Rob. I totally agree there. I mean, with respect to what's happening over here in the UK, it's pretty grim, really, because, you know, the English people seem to be just lying down and taking it. They don't seem to be joining the dots, not in any great significant numbers anyway. I mean, obviously there are small pockets of activism going on. There are, you know, individuals that are wising up, shall we say, but generally speaking, the general populace, from the impression I get out and about, it's quite tragic, actually. A lot of people just seem to be swallowing the narrative, and they're still wearing masks, even though you don't have to. You know, you go to a supermarket and I'm often the only person not wearing a mask. This isn't a good sign. It's not a good sign for a people that are informed and challenging, you know, what the homicidal people at the top, what the shots they're calling. I mean, it is absolutely crazy. So I'm not particularly optimistic over on this side of the pond, Rob.
I'm not. I share the sentiment. I'm not optimistic at the moment.
Yeah.
And what I really fear, Nigel, is the blowback that I absolutely believe is coming, and things are going to very likely get much messier than anything we've seen to date.
Yeah.
I don't relish that development, but I truly believe it's coming, and it's coming very fast now.
It seems to me that over here, in terms of you know, we've been a mixed economy for some decades, haven't we? Generally in the Western world, and that mixing. You know, the mix of, you know, a small amount of capitalism, just enough to make things work, because that's, of course, the magic ingredient, and then a varying degree of control. And over here, in the UK particularly, we've seen recently complete control assumed. You know, in terms of furloughing, paying people to stay at home, shutting down industries, saying you can't trade, you can't. We're seeing complete intervention of the economy in a way that should really alarm people. Of course, they're all distracted by the narrative, and they go, "Oh yes, protect us," you know. So, of course, most people aren't seeing this, but we're seeing unprecedented control, aren't we? I mean, do you think this is the end of the mixed economy, and the we're sort of rounding that corner into the full-blown controlled economy, aren't we? Like the Soviet Union was completely controlled. Do you think that's where we're going?
Yeah, well, this comes really, at the end of the day, this comes as no surprise to me. Much of what we're seeing today has been foreshadowed, or I don't know if I want to say as strongly as forecasted. But I mean, I've been speaking, and others like me have been speaking about the state of our financial affairs globally for many years now. And this is exactly the kind of action you would expect as the financial system obliterates in front of our eyes, which is occurring in spades. That is going on right now. And it seems to me the worse the financial picture gets, the more we are being prodded or corralled into what I would define as a police state. And the rise of the police state is not coincidental, but is occurring simultaneously with a devolution in our financial markets. And the fraud that has been perpetrated on mankind financially is now catching up with us, or being mirrored by the high-handedness and the imposition of the police state, where all facets of life are being brought under centralized and I mean, do note, please, Nigel, and all your listeners, the centralization The word central, think about that. We live under a regime where central banks call the shots. Central banks are not synonymous with capitalism. I hope people understand that. Central banks are foreign to capitalism, truth be known, and central banking is the central plank of the Communist Manifesto.
Yeah, absolutely.
Central banking is an organ of communism, not of capitalism. And these are the guys who are calling the shots. Yeah. So, not surprising we end up here. And we also know, because history is a very, very good guide, we know that irredeemable fiat money with compound interest is a system which is designed to fail. When this was pointed out to John Maynard Keynes, who we owe our existence in this fiat money regime we currently reside in, when it was pointed out to him in 1948 at Bretton Woods, where our current iteration of money was hatched, it was said to him, your system is designed to fail and will end in disaster. To which John Maynard Keynes, who was a despicable human being, literally shrugged his shoulders and said, so what? In the long run, we're all dead anyway. Well, now, you see the problem, Nigel, we are now living in the long run.
Yeah.
And with that, look what we're surrounded by.
Yeah.
Death, mayhem.
Yeah.
It's brutal.
It's interesting because some people might infer there that it was a mistake and, they initiated a system that would fail. Obviously that's very remiss, naughty boys. But really, the kernel there that I think people to get is that it's designed to fail. And I think I can't believe, when I bear in mind the Great Reset and the Agenda 21 and the many components of the published agenda towards global governance, this is not a secret. We can't have our heads in the sand and pretend that we don't know that there's a huge swathe of influence driving us towards global governance, more control. And when we bear that context in mind, it's deliberate, isn't it? And then there's been a lot of talk over the years. You and I have discussed it, and many other commentators about the coming collapse. You say it's occurring right now. Maybe we can put some flesh on that, just to sort of to illustrate it a little bit more clearly. But the point is, given the control, would the other people that are calling the shots, these despicable people, they don't want a random collapse. They want more of a controlled demolition, don't you think, Rob? Can you speak into that? The fact we know that we know that it's designed to fail. We know that things are falling down. What can you say into that sort of controlled demolition idea? Because they don't want it to fall down into a pile of rubble that suits you and me. They want it to fall down into a pile of rubble that suits, the next part of the agenda.
Yeah, well, I mean, you're right when you talk about controlled demolition, and what the powers that be are trying to achieve is a demolition. And I love your metaphoric, your choice of words. I mean, they want a controlled demolition, much like the World Trade Center that fell into a neat little pile where the buildings collapse into their own footprints. And, this is the hallmark, this is the hallmark of Bolshevism. The communist revolution in Russia in 1917 was not an accident. It was something that was planned. It was planned and it was funded by the Bush family, because it was Wall Street money that put $10 million back in 1917 on a train and sent it to Moscow to fund Vladimir Lenin and his takeover and takedown of the Tsar regime in Russia. So it was planned and it was funded, by Wall Street. That is the genesis of what happened. So, history, there's a saying, history, is a bitch, and it bites back. And, when do we get bitten, or when does the blowback occur with what's currently happening? Well, it's quite possible that what's been planned for later this month in Australia could be the opening salvo in blowback. I expect once blowback begins or is underway in earnest, I expect blowback to spread through international borders at a very, very good pace. So this is what I feel we have coming. Financially, we're in a situation right now financially where America's having a great deal of difficulty selling or marketing its current debt load. America continues to print new money or issue new debt, which is the creation of money. All money's born out of debt in a fiat money system. And if we look at the amount of repo that's occurring in America currently, like last week we hit an all-time new record for the amount of repo being conducted on behalf of the U.S. Treasury by the New York Federal Reserve. And to put this into layperson terms so people can understand what an increase in repo really means to the average person. Well, when America spends money, it doesn't have America issues bonds in the global marketplace. When there isn't natural demand for the debt being issued, it ends up on the books of a dealer network, which is a group of banks that have been selected or auditioned for the job of marketing the debt that America issues. Well, when repo goes up, it basically is a reflection of how unwanted the debt is. There are no end users or organic demand for the debt being issued. So what happens is the debt ends up sitting on the books of the dealers, which are the banks, and they can't sell it anywhere. Probably, Nigel, might have something to do with the fact that it doesn't yield anything. And when you have debt instruments that mature in 10 years and they yield nothing, there aren't a lot of buyers. So the banks have it on their books, but you see the banks don't want it on their books, and you see what's happened major over the past year is the Fed has been monetizing this unwanted debt. And they've grown their balance sheet. And like when the Fed monetizes debt, they buy it outright and they take it into their own inventory. And the problem is when the Fed's balance sheet grows the way it has in the past year, from I think 3.8 trillion up to 8.2 trillion currently, the world starts to look at the Fed like the Central Bank of Zimbabwe, or like the Riksbank in Weimar, Germany, and they lose all credibility. So what the repo does is it allows banks to not take it into their inventory and basically chew up their capital, and and it serves as a stopgap. It's a cheap parlor trick. You see, if the Fed monetizes the debt and takes it onto their own balance sheet, then their balance sheet would grow basically overnight by another 1.1 trillion, which is currently the amount of repo that's being done on a daily basis. So this repo activity, it's view it as a stopgap and a smoke and mirrors game, where the Fed on a daily basis buys the debt from the dealers. So the dealers are flush with cash on a daily basis because they're selling the debt to the Fed on an overnight basis. And the Fed, because they're doing a repo where it's only a one-day deal, but they keep rolling it over and over and over. Like every day they roll the same trillion over. But this allows the Fed to say they haven't actually purchased it. Okay? It's sort of like renting an apartment versus buying a flat. You see, if you're paying rent, you're not liable for the mortgage because you're paying rent. Okay? So if you own a flat and if it goes down in value, you're subject to a capital loss. Like you've been skinned alive. So, but if you're renting, you don't have that problem. Repo is like renting, okay? And so, but anyway, this ends in tears. Yeah. This does not have a happy ending.
No. Is that part of the plan, this repo? Because, you mentioned the debt isn't actually worth anything. It's pretty challenging to sell it to somebody when it doesn't yield anything, et cetera, et cetera. But ultimately, the parasite class, the shareholders of the central banks, the foreclosure seems to me like a great result for them because they, they're in the game of just printing funny money out of thin air. But if they can end up with their hands on solid assets, like real estate, I mean, if you end up with real estate and you've just printed a lot of money, that's a pretty good deal, isn't it? You've actually got some hard assets out of it. So what do you say to those that claim that's actually, more the whole point is to try and get more foreclosures, and the whole point of this debt-based economy is to try to get. I mean, we're told, it's a quick tangent, we're told by the Klaus Schwab and the Great Reset that we're going to be renting everything and owning nothing, and we're going to be happy about it by 2030. Are they not trying to sort of get us ready for, we've lost our homes, we've lost this and that, people can't find jobs. Sooner or later, the repossessions will extend, across huge swathes of society. Might they not? Do you think that's possibly where things are going by design?
Let's just say actors who are highly aligned with the central banking edifice. In America, we need look no further than BlackRock.
Yeah.
And BlackRock has been de facto the biggest buyer of real estate in America, period, for the last 2 years. They have been scooping up. They've actually been paying above offered price for real estate. And this is all very consistent with the utterances of Klaus Schwab, who says basically the nation will, or the central authorities will own everything. You will own nothing, and you will be happy.
Yeah.
And this whole reset that's being pushed, the gist of the reset is that everybody who has debt will have their debts forgiven. And in exchange, they will receive from the state it's called a guaranteed income or a guaranteed stipend on a monthly basis, and in exchange for that, people will have to sign on the dotted line that going forward they will own no private property, and everything will be everything material will be owned by the state. And if that isn't communism, if that isn't the definition, the dictionary definition of communism, tell me what is. And that's where our movers and shakers want to take us.
Yeah.
And I say to that, no, thank you. Yeah. And, frankly, this is a hill I'm willing to die on.
Yeah. I like the idea of people sort of rising up and resisting and saying enough and no, but I can't see the English people here following suit, following the example, that will hopefully be set by the Australians. There's definitely a squeeze on for the middle class here in the UK. I have friends that are business owners, and the sort of small family business and slightly larger, they can't quite compete with the really big guys, so they're sort of necessarily squeezed on price competition anyway. And then, of course, the big boys have got their partners in government. They can just elbow them and say, look, let's just add a few more regulations onto their shoulders just to weigh them down even further. And it's difficult to see the middle classes really surviving. I've got friends just in the catering and the pub industries, this sort of thing, and it's just getting very, very difficult for them. So it's very difficult to see anything really positive here, and including some kind of blowback. So do you think, just come back onto that, Rob, do you think people in Canada and in the States are really going to, are they going to stand up and say, look, this is just crazy, we're not having this anymore? And will we see mass resistance?
I believe we will. And I believe it's nascent at the moment. It's maybe not expressing itself fully, but it's coming. And there will be blowback, I do believe, and I do believe there will be serious blowback. And what can I point to say that that's coming? Let's put it this way, Nigel. The central authorities have given us targets. Months ago, they gave us targets as to where they wanted to be in terms of percentage of population who've been introduced to the wonderful girl called Maxine. And, and let's just say they wanted 70% of the population to have met Maxine by now.
Yep.
And I believe the reality is that probably somewhere, maybe even shy of 50% of the peoples have become accustomed to or familiar with Maxine. Yep. It seems that this girl isn't quite as popular as our overlords thought she might be. So, frankly, I have no time at all for Maxine. I think she's a fraud, and I think she is a very, very dangerous individual.
Yeah.
So I want nothing to do with her.
Yep. Absolutely. Me too, to the point where I'll leave the country with my wife and children and flee as refugees if I need to avoid meeting Maxine. That's how seriously I take it. I've satisfied myself that it's that dangerous. I agree. I think a lot of the time the published figures, are probably slightly massaged in the upward direction in order to.
They're not, Nigel. They're not massaged. We're being told outright lies. We are being lied. We are being lied to on a wholesale level, in much the same way that we've been lulled into believing that all is well in financial land. These people. Nigel. We know they're lying because their lips are moving. It's become that bad, and that might sound cliche, but it's very, very true and accurate.
It is. So, given that, and thank you for correcting me on that, we can't really, give any credibility to the figures, but obviously you can see that there'd be an incentive for them to be inflated in order to make certainly all the sheep around here in the UK look left and right and think, blimey, everyone else has had it. Look, the figure's up at 80%. I'd better go and book mine. And we know that will work on an alarming number of people, quite sadly. But I share, the view that the uptake probably isn't as good as they'd like us to believe.
Well, Nigel, you see, in my personal experience, I don't personally know anybody who has passed on due to COVID. But now that being said, I know there are people who have succumbed to COVID. But what I can tell you, in the past 4 weeks, I know people. These are people who I've actually met. In the past 3 weeks, 4 people who have met Maxine twice, who have had strokes or heart attacks.
Amongst my sort of circle, if you like, all the people I know, there's nobody who has met their demise solely due to this, alleged condition, this alleged cause. In fact, none of us have been ill for 18 months. No one's had a cold, flu. Again, I say that in my social circle. So I totally share your view there. But we also know a fair few people who have been introduced to Maxine and absolutely similarly fairly disastrous results, serious outcomes.
The interesting thing, I take a lot of this very personally. A couple of years ago, early 2019, January of 2019, I got ill. And I was admitted to hospital, and I spent 5 weeks in critical care. And my symptoms were double pneumonia, blood clots on my lungs, and my medical team had informed my family that they didn't expect me to live. So I was slated to die. And what brought me back was a round of steroids. And anyway, all I'm saying is what afflicted me was classic extreme COVID. So
it would be called that now, wouldn't it? There's no way.
Oh, absolutely, without a doubt. If I showed up in hospital with the exact same things today, I know exactly how it would have been dealt with today.
You've been put on a ventilator.
I would have been put on a ventilator immediately. They wanted to put me on a ventilator. In January, late January 2019. This is before the world had heard the name COVID, or before there was any outbreak. And the issue at the time for me is that I had family, and my family advocated for me and argued against ventilating because the medical professionals wanted to ventilate me.
Yeah.
Well, fast forward to today, because of the whole situation surrounding this would-be virus, family advocates are not allowed in the hospital. They're barred from entering. So if I were to have the same circumstance today as happened to me in 2019, there would be no consultation and no listening to anybody advocating for me, and I was unable to answer for myself because I was just deliriously sick, and I would be ventilated, and I would almost certainly succumb under ventilation or being intubated.
Absolutely.
So, I feel like I've sort of had the kiss of, or a very near kiss of death. And the interesting thing, I had extensive follow-up after my illness, and I asked my doctor late 2019, when this pandemic was first rearing its head, and I asked my doctor if I had that. And my doctor said, no, you didn't have it. I said, well, all my symptoms seem to be identical to what is being described as that now. So how do you know I didn't have it? He said, because it hadn't been invented yet. Those were his words. It hadn't been invented yet. And you know what? Very appropriate words, because it was an invention. It came out of a lab, and here we are today.
Yeah.
So
You're lucky that you caught the condition before it was invented.
I caught my family actually referred to me as Omega Man.
Well, hats off to your family for intervening as they did as well, and it's alarming to learn that possibility is now denied to people. That's absolutely shocking. It's criminal.
So, to people of a certain age, Nigel, the saying "missed it by that much" applies to me. So.
Well, thank goodness you're still, alive and kicking and resisting and getting the message out, Rob. So,
doing my best.
Yeah, good stuff. How do you see the crypto dimension playing into everything that we've talked about? Because I used to buy into Bitcoin, having heard some words by what's his name, Mr. Eric Voorhees. And I used to think Bitcoin was that beautiful vehicle for freedom, but now I'm not so sure. Now, when I contemplate secrecy and how it really doesn't benefit the good, it really can only benefit nefarious purposes, secrecy, the whole, Satoshi Nakamoto thing. How do you see this, the crypto thing playing alongside? Because we know that they want a cashless society. We know that they want a controllable, crypto fiat currency hybrid thing. We know they don't want gold. They don't want you and I to go, hurrah, our gold stocks under that creaky floorboard are now worth 10 times what we paid for them. They don't want that. So what do you think about the crypto sphere? Obviously there's a little bit of a rise going on. We've seen ups and downs.
Yeah, well, okay. I view crypto along with precious metals as anti-dollar trades, and both have very, very strong merits in terms of must own. And when I say must own, I am not talking particularly when I make reference to metals. I'm not talking about owning futures or owning a certificate saying you are entitled to X amount of metal. I'm talking about when I mention metals in terms of ownership, I'm talking about physical bars or coins in your possession, which you use your imagination to hide.
Yeah.
So, and I'm not talking about storing them in a safe deposit box in a bank. I'm talking about metal where you take it home, you dig a hole in your backyard, and you hide it, and it disappears. It goes underground.
Yeah.
You hide it in your attic, you hide it underground, but you have it, and nobody can deny you of it. So, unfortunately, the vast majority of metals that trade in the world do so on exchanges where they do so in paper form or in digital form.
Mm-hmm.
And the amount of paper and digital precious metal that gets traded bears no resemblance to the amount of metal that's actually extracted from the Earth's crust each year, which are very finite numbers.
Yeah.
So, the amount, to give people, to sort of put people's head into perspective, the amount of gold that comes out of the Earth's crust in a year, it's roughly about 100 million ounces, thereabouts. And the amount of silver that comes out of the Earth's crust in a year is roughly about 8 or 9 times that. So 800 million ounces, roughly, of silver gets mined a year. So the amount of gold and silver that trades on the COMEX, which is a lesser exchange to what trades in London, and the market in London is referred to as the LBMA, or the London Bullion Market Association, and that's where the heavy lifting in metals is done. But in New York, on the COMEX exchange alone, they will trade in paper form 100 million ounces of gold in a good trading day, which is only 5 hours long. That's ridiculous. That's ridiculous and repugnant. And commodities law that exists is supposed to prevent that from happening. But the problem we have is that the suppression of metals prices is a government operation. And governments suppress precious metals prices so that it makes the competitor, or the relative competitor, which is their fiat currency, it makes the fiat currency look stronger than it otherwise would.
Okay.
So metals prices have been and are continuing to be suppressed in the hope that they make the fiat money look better, or as basically they want metals to not appear as a credible alternative to the money that's being debased, the fiat money that's being debased on a daily basis.
Sure.
Now, you mentioned that they want to take us to a place where we have cashless or digital money. They want to get. They realize fiat money's failing, so they think if they take us into a digital world, which they hope to, they're going to win the day. The problem with that is that cryptocurrencies have gained in popularity tremendously, as evidenced by the price of Bitcoin and Ethereum, which are the poster childs. The two of them are the main poster childs for crypto. But everyone should sit back and think about why Bitcoin and why Ethereum and why the cryptoverse has taken off the way it has. They've taken off because they're decentralized. And they've taken off because the central banking authorities cannot restrict or increase the number of units that are in existence. You see, Bitcoin has a very finite supply. It's absolutely really a little bit of a head turner that Bitcoin, which doesn't really exist in physical form anywhere, you can't sell Bitcoin you don't own. Gold and silver, which are real, that are mined from the Earth's crust, people can sell those in infinite amounts because regulators don't do their job. But cryptocurrencies, as they exist today, you cannot do that. And what central bankers are proposing the world over is that they bring out their own central bank digital currencies. And what I'm saying here right now, that dog will never hunt, because central bank cryptocurrencies will not be decentralized. And will be, in effect, a do-over for the people who have screwed the world with fiat money. Because a centralized cryptocurrency amounts to a fiat currency on steroids.
Yeah.
And nobody in their right mind and big and intelligent money will never buy into it. So that amounts to game, set, and match to me.
So from that perspective, then, it would seem that blockchain decentralized cryptocurrencies are effectively the way forward, aren't they? They are non-corruptible by the central banking system, assuming what you're saying, and if they have a limited number, built into the fabric of the program, the white paper, obviously you can't create more coins. There's a finite number of coins. They would appear then to be pretty bulletproof. What about some of the? So I take that, and I'm heartened by that. But just to sort of play devil's advocate slightly, there's a lot of cryptocurrencies out there, as most people will know. Lots of different platforms and so forth. Yeah. Could one be a Trojan horse? Could the Trojan horse principle be employed?
Oh, listen, Nigel, I'm not naive. anywhere that attracts wealth or attracts money, there will be bad players. Anywhere where you have massive amounts of money involved, it's an invitation to fraudsters to come in and try to ply their trade. We have thousands of cryptocurrencies that have been minted or that have come out of the ether. I don't expect them all. I expect a great deal of them to fail.
Yeah.
But the best of the best will survive. And at the end of the day, I guess the statement I really want to make is that decentralized cryptos will be a big part of our future. Centralized cryptos that may or may not be controlled by central banks will never gain traction because they are fraudulent without a doubt. Yeah. And there may also be decentralized, and I'm not saying every decentralized cryptocurrency on the planet will survive or thrive. Far from it. But there will be winners. There will be lots of losers, and there will be a few winners.
Yeah.
And if you're holding one of the winners, your purchasing power will probably survive pretty much intact.
Yeah.
In the fiat world, I believe that the only thing in our immediate future is a move towards a dramatic hyperinflation, which I think we've pretty much seen the thin edge of the wedge of already.
So in terms of inflation, let's just pick that ball up with it for a moment. You've already spoken about the manipulation of the metals markets, and clearly that would need to be done to mask the inflation, wouldn't it? Otherwise, you'd see the price of the metals steadily going up, which would give away the fact that the currency is going down in value. So. How is it? I mean, are there any other tools that are being employed apart from the control of the metals market?
Sure, absolutely. Listen, we are brought up thinking that the way to wealth or the way to prosperity, there's an axiom. It's called buy low, sell high. Okay, the people that control our fiat money regime, they have created much, much, much more money than they acknowledge. Okay? And they've created literally, I'm going to say at very, very minimum, many tens of trillions more than they acknowledge to exist. And where they hide this money is in places like a secret adjunct of the U.S. Treasury is known as the Exchange Stabilization Fund, or the ESF. And my contention is that many, many tens of trillions of dollars are hiding in that obscure location. And the Exchange Stabilization Fund has been around for a long time. It was created in 1934. They publish no financials, and they're subject to no oversight by any political body. And they are operated, for the most part, at the exclusive command of the executive in the United States. Call it the president or the secretary of the Treasury. In recent years, going back to George W. Bush, the clown, he transferred a lot of the control of that entity over to the intelligence establishment. And, not by coincidence in my books, it was during the reign of George W. the Terrible that the U.S. intelligence establishment adopted a much more arrogant stance in global affairs. And I believe that much of that is owing to the fact that they were basically put in charge of this secret fund. With this secret fund, this fund that contains many, many tens of trillions, and for people who don't understand just how much money that there really is in the world versus how much is acknowledged to exist, direct people to the work of Dr. Mark Skidmore and Catherine Austin Fitts. Dr. Skidmore occupies a prestigious chair in economics. He's a PhD economist with a PhD staff under him, and he's done work in the Social Security Trust edifice in America, and his work is highly suggestive that there are many tens of trillions of dollars that have gone missing from U.S. coffers, and that money's being fraudulently created. And to me, that I view it as the linchpin that explains how these entities like the Exchange Stabilization Fund have come to have so much resource. Now, I mentioned a little bit earlier that, the axiom in the world, the way to prosperity is to buy low and sell high. You see, I believe that the arms of the government are heavily involved in the crypto sphere. And I believe what they are doing, they buy high and sell low. They have so much fiat money at their disposal that if they buy high and sell low, what they do by engaging in that activity is they introduce massive volatility into the cryptos like Bitcoin. Mm-hmm. And then they use that volatility that they have created to say cryptos are not, or cryptos as they currently exist, are not worthy of being considered a reserve asset or sound money.
Yeah. Well, that sounds credible. So, yeah, go on.
Their fingerprints, in my view, are all over the cryptoverse.
Right.
And they know that the desirability and the fungibility of cryptos is growing exponentially. And what they want to do more than anything is muddy the waters and make them look, or so they can develop a narrative that these things are not ready for prime time yet.
Okay. Just saying to that, any excess funds like that would be perfect for scooping up any of the assets on all of these.
And it's
repos.
not inflationary.
No.
You see, if you think it through, and I know a lot of people would be very dismissive first hearing this. They'd say, "Oh, come on, Rob. There's no way that they would buy high and sell low." What you don't understand, they have all these tens of trillions that aren't even acknowledged to exist.
Yeah.
If they spend that money in the real economy, it's highly inflationary and it screws them.
Yeah.
So instead, what they do is they spend that money in the crypto space, where they can muddy the waters and then try to propagate the notion that cryptos are too unstable.
Well, that makes sense. If their goal is to create instability, that fits. That hypothesis certainly fits, doesn't it? But how do we reconcile that, Rob, with the fact that the World Economic Forum, their Great Reset, that they want some kind of new digital cryptocurrency? So how do we reconcile that desire? We know that they want that. We know they don't want cash. They don't want, they want to do away with the paper stuff entirely. So how do we reconcile that with this destabilizing practice of the crypto sphere? How can we reconcile that destabilizing activity that they're doing with the excess funds with their desire to ultimately present us or enable us to land in the lap of a cryptocurrency of their choice?
Okay, at the end of the day, in my view, what the authorities hope to do is launch their own cryptocurrency that centralized, that they have control of, and can control the supply of, expand it, or contract it whenever they choose. That's never gonna happen. That dog won't hunt. because nobody is going to buy or willfully buy a central bank digital currency that is centrally controlled. It's not going to happen. It's just like, nope, you see, Nigel, nobody's ever going to put a square wheel on their car. You know why? Because if you do, you're not going anywhere. You're stuck. Okay? So square wheels won't hunt. They don't happen. And nobody will buy a square wheel. And a central bank, centrally controlled digital currency is a square wheel. And it won't go.
What about a lot of these sort of unthinking people? I can only point around in my own country that use these track and trace apps that are prepared to accept a special document that proves that they've met Maxine a couple of times in order to go out nightclubbing. This is something that's being talked about here in the mainstream narrative, it being introduced in September. It's only a short hop from there to the same thing for gymnasium use. What about all these people who are so easily led? It seems to me, I totally get your point about square wheels, and I wouldn't buy one, but it seems to me that there's a lot of stupid people out there that probably might. And if they're already convinced of the wisdom of this ticket to do anything within our culture, to come and go to public places, will they therefore not be so stupid as to accept these funny tokens? Most people don't know what a centralized or a decentralized token is, whether it's blockchain or whether they'll just think, this is the official token. Yeah. There we go.
Well, so my response to that is, and I'm sad to say it because I know many people who have met Maxine twice, some in my own family. And the brutal reality is, when you talk about what about all these people who've met Maxine twice and what they might do, unfortunately, and this remains to be seen, and I admit this, but I truly don't think the people who've met Maxine twice or very soon 3 times, and probably if we give it another couple of years, if any of them are left, maybe 4th, 5th, 6th time. Yeah. These people are going to be a non-issue. You know why? They're not going to be here.
Yeah. Well, I think I agree with that.
And that's sadly, I think it's very accurate. Yeah. Many of these people are slated for the not to be here soon.
Yeah.
So, and that will leave, you see, and whoever said Darwin was completely wrong? Survival of the fittest. This could very well end up being making Darwin look like a brilliant guy, because you know what? The people who have resisted the blind date with Maxine probably end up being the survivors in all this.
I would definitely say that there's an evolutionary advantage to those people who are, exercising their grey matter, and some degree of choice as to whether they participate in a lot of what's going on, experimental treatment wise.
That's my view on it, Nigel. Yeah. And you know what? If I'm incorrect on that thought, I'm happily incorrect, and I will welcome any derisive comments anyone has to say. But let's give it a year and a half to see how that plays out, because unfortunately, I don't think it's going to be a pleasant outcome for humanity.
No, fair play. Well, I know you haven't got a crystal ball, Rob, but by way of sort of wrapping things up, have you any thoughts or comments on what might happen? You've already talked about this blowback and stuff in Australia, but have you any other comments perhaps on what we might expect to see, given all of this that's happening at the moment, given this sort of the latest uptick in cryptos, et cetera, et cetera?
Well, my view for the past 3 years, and I've been very consistent on this, is that the anti-dollar trades do well. So the decentralized cryptos continue to go vector higher, and metals prices are a bit of a bifurcated story in that premiums for physical metal bear no resemblance to the price you see on the screen, which is the paper price. And premiums for physical metal have risen, and I believe they will continue to rise. And at the end of the day, you have to own physical precious metal, because the day when everything breaks down, which is getting closer with every passing day, I don't truly believe you will be able to buy physical metal with fiat money, period, when the system breaks apart. And that's why you have to be pre-positioned and own it now.
Yeah.
And there will be times owning it now when you will literally have to plug your nose and close your eyes and say, that's fine, if I have extra money, I'll buy a little bit more. But cryptos so for the past 3 years, I have said, I like the anti-dollar trades, and I think that this whole move higher in anti-dollar assets will be led by cryptos, because the powers that be, the only way they can really interfere in the cryptos is to buy high and sell low. That's not sustainable.
Yeah.
Okay? That is not sustainable in a finite world.
No.
Okay? And then at some point they will throw the towel in on suppressing precious metal, because even their fiat money will reach a point where they have less and less of it.
Yeah.
And creation of the amounts that they need to create will draw too much attention and expose them as the frauds they truly are. At some point, Nigel, all of the dollars that are held in reserve accounts around the world will come home.
Yeah. And that's just a good time to be well positioned to have assets outside of dollar world and
exactly.
currency land. Yeah, well, as always, I mean, I know you've said it before, but precious metals are really, really top consideration, as well as cryptos. It's a great idea to have your assets, spread across a number of different options, really, isn't it, Rob, in these most uncertain of uncertain times?
Sure. Anti-dollar trades. And I'm not gonna say exclusively it's either cryptos or metal. Some productive farmland probably wouldn't hurt. But at this point in time, I certainly would not be a speculator in the residential real estate market.
No. Thank you so much for your comments today. Great to catch up with you again and get an update on things. And let's not leave it quite as long until the next time. I think this has been just over a year. But thank you so much, Rob. It's always a great pleasure to get your insights and your view on the crazy stuff that's going down at the moment. So many, many thanks to you for your time today. And thank you, everybody, for listening. Do remember to check out the website, lawfulrebel.com. There's loads more on there as well, loads of links to follow, and indeed how to discern and find truth. So I do hope you'll all join us again for another episode of Living Outside the Matrix.
Be the change you want to see. Be the change you want to see. Be the change you want to see. Be